Today, we start a new feature, listener messages. We want to hear what you've learned from the Heritage Words podcast. If you'd like to record a message, please email me at sbenor@huc.edu. This is Heritage Words, a podcast about the words we've inherited from our ancestors and the meaning they bring to our lives. Heritage Words is produced by the HUC Jewish Language Project, which raises awareness about Jewish ancestral diversity through the lens of language. I'm your host, Sarah Bunin-Benor. Our guest today is Shep Rosenman. Shep is the managing partner of RLG LLP, an entertainment law firm that negotiates deals for talent across the globe. He's a musician and songwriter, an avid student and teacher about many topics, including things related to law and things related to Judaism. And he's currently writing a song cycle based on the Psalms and is producing a podcast related to that song cycle called The Rest is Commentary. Shep is one of the founders of Limud LA, was a trustee and member of the Limud Global Board, and was the founding president of Limud North America. He's also a board member of Yeshivat Chovevei Torah, a Wexner Heritage alum, and an AJWS Global Justice Fellow. And perhaps most importantly, Shep and I have played music together, including klezmer music, and a song that we wrote and performed together called Into the Wow. Shep, welcome to Heritage Words.
Ashenim Dank.
All right, so we're already getting into the Yiddish.
Thanks for having me here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So let's start with your names. Your first name is kind of unusual. Tell us about your first name and any other names you have.
So, Shep is the Americanized version of my Hebrew name. All three names appear on my birth certificate. My Hebrew name is Shabtai Ari, and the third name is Shep. My brother's name is Tzvi. So my grandmother freaked out that my parents were going to be calling me Shabtai because that would mean that we would have Shabtai Tzvi in the family, a famous false messiah from the 1500s or the 1600s. And many, many years later, when my brother and I were thinking of going into business together, he's a movie producer. We were going to call it False Messiah Productions. That never happened.
Okay, wait. I just have to take a minute and laugh because, I'm muted, but I just wanted to tell you that's really funny. Okay, so Shep is the Yiddish is from the Yiddish Shepsel, which is the Yiddish version of Shabtai, right?
Well, I think Shepsel often becomes is what it results from Shabtai, but I think the more accurate it would be Shabsel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which becomes Shepsel, which might be easier for people in the West to say or in America. I grew up, there was a chef at YU whose name was also Shabsi, and he became Chopsy.
Hmm. Oh, that's interesting. Um, okay, well, I think Shepsel is definitely an Ashkenazi name, a variant of Shabtai. And so when you are called to the Torah, what name are you called by?
Shabtai Ari ben Moshe Yosef, or in Ikar, ben Moshe Yosef Vesima.
Okay. And just to clarify, Ikar is the synagogue that we both go to, and it is a non-Orthodox synagogue. So it sounds like if you're in an Orthodox synagogue, you wouldn't say your mother's name in being called to the Torah.
I might say it, but they won't acknowledge it.
Okay. Okay. So how do you feel about your names? Do you feel connected to them? Do you feel like they are related to your ancestry?
Oh, for sure. Okay, I'm going to answer them in order. I love my names. I think that there's something about names in Jewish tradition that is supposed to capture the spirit. We don't refer to God as God, but as the name. That's the daily common use. And of course, elsewhere, Solomon says, Tov Shem Kishem and Tov. A good name is like fine oil. So there's something about naming this, and God gives Adam the power to name the animals. Um, so for me, I think Shabtai and Ari, my Sabbaths, or Saturn. I was a space cadet as a kid. I was undiagnosed with ADD. But more important than that, as an adult, like I'm not afraid to kind of take an out there position or to write a song that is outside of the norm because it's okay to do that. And I think that I really reflect that. That's my name reflects that value. And Shabtai and Ari, of course, is Ari is lion, which of course in Jewish tradition is about royalty and about protecting, Judah the lion, and Shep lightens it all up a bit. It's like it's a heavy name if like you think about it, but when you add Shep to it, it's like, oh, he's not so threatening.
With the word Shep, the name Shep, do you think about sheep?
Oh, everybody else does. I think about Shepsel. I think about Sheppy, which is what I was called growing up, and which a few friends have adopted, knowing or not knowing. I had one work colleague who decided to call me Shepala. And I was like, well, that's a little too intimate given like that this is really a work relationship. But I was okay with it. It's fun. It keeps it light.
All
And
right.
by the way, my first job as a lawyer, my boss said, we're not calling you Sheppy. It's not serious enough. That's when I became Shep.
Oh, okay. So you used to go by Sheppy full time.
Well, that's what my parents called me, even though my name is technically Shep or
Yeah.
Shabtai Ari Shep.
Yeah. Okay. So where did you grow up?
Far Rockaway, New York, Ir HaKodesh, the holy city.
Okay. And where were your parents from?
Both of my parents were born in Jerusalem. So, like, I have copies of their passports or their entries or both. And it says, British Mandate Palestine.
Hmm.
So this
And
is
when
1919 and 1923 or 24.
that's when they
Emigrated.
migrate,
No,
when
I
they
guess my
emigrated.
dad was born in 19 and he emigrated in 23 or 26, and my mom in 26 or 28, something like that.
And where did they migrate from?
Jerusalem.
Oh, you're saying they migrated from Jerusalem to America at that time.
Correct.
And where were their ancestors from? And do you know how many generations back?
Yeah. On my on my father's side of the family, they go back. They were in Jerusalem. I guess they started in Tveria and Tzfat, but they landed in Jerusalem and were there for a long, long time, for 5 generations. And in my mother's family, I don't know where they started, possibly also in Tveria, but they landed in Mishkanot Sha'ananim very early in Jerusalem. They were 7 generations in Jerusalem. So
Wow.
1840, 1860, Hasidic communities. My father was a Stoliner, like comes from a long line of Stoliner Hasidim, and my mother from a long line of Sens Halberstam Hasidim. My dad's family was, I think, more like businessmen who were serious about learning, but they were interested in being the entrepreneurs, the Zvulans, if you will. That's the money-making tribe. And my mother's family were the Sofrim, the scribes, the learners. They wrote books and Sfarim. But both of them had strong, strong music backgrounds. Chazanim on both sides.
Wow. And so your family was all Ashkenazi. Do you know if your parents spoke Yiddish or Hebrew as their primary languages when they were children?
Yiddish for both of them.
Yiddish. Okay. Okay. Did they also speak Hebrew?
Not my mother, for sure. My dad, a little bit, because he was in Cheder, Cheder at the Mir, and so there was some Hebrew spoken there, at a minimum to study the Torah. I mean, he was very young when he left. If he left when in 26, he was 7. But by the time you're 7, you're already encountering, at least the Torah, probably even a little bit of Mishnah.
And so the Mir Yeshiva, that isn't that Litvish rather than Hasidic?
Yeah. But so look, we're mutts. We're really mutts because um, while there was and who knows how much of this is family mythology and how much of it is fact, but my father, as he tells the story, they were serious Hasidim, and when I look at photos every Monday, I meet with my siblings and whichever cousins want to show up, and we go through old family photos, and I can share them with you if you want to see them. But my great grandfather and earlier, and great grandmother and earlier, they're all very clearly in Hasidic garb. And it's also clear that they're in the world to some extent because they're taking these photos. My
Mm.
grandfather and his siblings, like, and their friends, they appear in much more modern clothing. They're without kippot, there's no beard. So there's something happening there. And even when my dad first moved to the States, they went to kind of a pan Hasidic shtibel called the Degel. I forget if it was in Brownsville or Williamsburg. Um, but he was also a member of the Shomer HaTzair, which is a secular, socialist, Zionist organization. And so it's this complex mélange, or cholent, if you will, of what it meant to be a Jew in Jerusalem in the early 20th century.
Oh my gosh, that's such an interesting mixed background. And so tell me about your childhood growing up in Far Rockaway.
Ir HaKodesh, the Holy
Ir
City.
HaKodesh. Sorry, you got to add that. Right, right.
um, so I grew up on Caffrey Avenue. I guess we started on Beach Ninth. Not that you know the geography, but they're both kind of central ventricles within the Far Rockaway community. There were a lot of shuls in Far Rockaway. They weren't all Orthodox. There were some conservative synagogues. There were some Shtiblach, Rabbi Blumenkrantz, Rabbi Rubin. Those were Rabbi Blumenkrantz was Hasid-ish. Rabbi Rubin was Ger Chassid out and out. But we started out at Shari Tefillah, which was off Beach 9th Street on Central Avenue. And that was the home first to Rabbi Emanuel Rackman, who was a leader of the modern Orthodox world in the 60s and 70s. And my parents were very, very close with him. He eventually moved, I forget if he went to Israel first and then went to Temple Emmanuel or the other way around. And when he left Shari Tefillah, the rabbi became Rabbi Wurzburger, another leading thinker of the modern Orthodox world in the 60s and 70s. He was a professor at YU. And while they loved Rabbi Wurzburger, we had spent a year in Israel in 70, 71, and my dad, I guess, got used to the smaller trappings of small shuls in Israel, and so we started going to the Young Israel of Far Rockaway, which is at our corner. And that was Rabbi Nathan Bullman, who, this was a Young Israel community, but he was kind of Hasidish in his way. He opened up a yeshiva, I think it was Or Sameach back in the day. And he was very, very serious lamdan with a big, big heart. So Far Rockaway was all of that. And Far Rockaway was, my dad wasn't really a regular shul goer during the week. It was Shabbos that he went to go to shul during the week. He would sit at home and he would be very careful to put on talis and tefillin to daven in the morning. He'd come home from work. He would daven mincha and marav. And before going to bed, he would say Tehillim, which is how I ended up in this Tehillim song cycle.
Okay, and Tehillim means Psalms.
Correct, sorry. Anyway, all that's going on while my dad is the local printer, including for Shari Tefillah and the Young Israel, which is how we became close with these various rabbis. And he was printing for all the beach clubs and all the churches. So it was even though we were very kind of parochial in this modern Orthodox world, we were also very much exposed to the wider world. And once I started playing guitar and started befriending black kids and Puerto Rican kids, eventually some Irish kids too, the world just opened. And so Far Rockaway was home for all of us, and we appreciated going to parties in the Dominican community. I was asked to play music. My dad's truckman, James, I don't remember his name, but like for the big jobs, James would bring them in his truck and he would deliver them to the beach clubs or the shul dinners or whatever. And so I always worked at my dad's store. I got to know James, and I asked him if he would schlep all of my musical equipment and my drummer's musical equipment up to camp one summer. And he did. And we got to talking, and he said, "You guys play any gospel or any funk?" And Gary or Gershon and I looked at each other and said, "We love that stuff." And he said, "You guys want to come jam in the church band?" So we got to play at the Far Rockaway Baptist something or other. So Far Rockaway was very parochial and very universal. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yes. And so did you go to an Orthodox school?
The Hebrew Institute of Long Island, which became the Hebrew Academy of Five Towns in Rockaway, High, and Hafter, respectively.
And you were obviously involved beyond your school with non-Jews. Did you know Yiddish? Did you use any Yiddish in school or at home?
Yiddish was the language my parents spoke when they didn't want us to understand, but you acquire a lot of it. Like every Rosh Hashanah, my mother would say, "Beit Zachos Alstin Gut." Essentially, blessings for all good things in the coming year. And when Tippy would run away, my father would say, "Ugh, that verstunkene Hund," the stinky dog. And when he at the store, my father was one of his other Yiddish-speaking friends. He would say, "Was machst du? What's happening?" Or "Was machst du Yid? What's happening, you other Jew?" Ashenim Dank, which we started my part of the podcast with. My favorite one, of course, was "You're in shul, nisht Shabbat geredt, nisht Shabbos geredt." This is my brother who also gets through, but I declined it. And you know that old joke, right?
Tell us.
Okay, I gave you the punchline. All right. The old joke is Chaim goes to shul and he sits next down to Morty and he says, "Morty, I hear you're selling your car." And Morty says, "Yeah, nish Shabbos geredt." And Chaim says, "Okay, nish Shabbos geredt, how much do you want for it?" And Morty says, "Nish Shabbos geredt, I'm asking $1,000. This is back in the day. This goes back to the 70s. And Morty says, I'm sorry. Chaim says, "I don't know, $1,000 is a lot. I was thinking maybe 750." And Chaim says, "Nish Shabbos geredt. I'm not really sold on that. I just want to. If you can come up more, maybe. Like, get back to me." Okay. Goes to sit in his seat. Comes back after shul, and he says, "New Morty, what do you think? If I increase to 850?" And Morty says, "I'm so sorry, Chaim. Nish Shabbos geredt, it's sold already."
Okay. And to just explain to our audience what nisht Shabbos geredt means.
Um, Not on Shabbos. It's not right. Right. So, like, you don't talk about work on Shabbos is the general gist of it. And you know what? There are shuls where people don't talk, and there are shuls where people don't talk about work. But by and large, even in the most Haredi institutions I went to, there was always some kind of work happening. Even, "Oh, Shep, can we meet next week? I'm looking to raise some funds for the shul." I'm sorry. That's your job. That's business. I don't care if it's a holy work.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So it sounds like it was mostly a life conducted in English with some Yiddish, especially from the older generation, and more than just words here and there, but larger phrases and sentences and things that may not be found in other communities that were farther removed from the generation of Yiddish speakers.
Yeah, I would say so.
All right.
Did you want me to add
So
to that?
no,
Okay,
no,
go
sorry.
ahead.
It was just there was noise here and I was just muting for a second. Well, it's okay. Okay, so also now I want to turn to heritage words. I understand you've made a list of many, many Yiddish words that you grew up with or that you know and that you use, and let's start talking about them.
You need this like a Luchan cup. You need it like a hole in the head. But the truth is, obviously, that's the point of this podcast. What do they grow up with, and what can we transmit to the next generation? My kids have grown up with all these phrases, obviously. I have no idea what, if any, they will take on, but they certainly understand. Verstehst? You understand? You know, they think picha is gross. So did my mother. That's jellied calves' feet. But on the other hand, Lakshin Kugel was in our house every Friday. That's noodle kugel. And, you know, my father and I preferred the Yerushalmi Lakshin Kugel, which is brown sugar and lots of pepper, which is a great combination. But my mother did not make a Yerushalmi kugel. She made a salt and pepper noodle kugel. And my father liked it super crunchy on the outside. And, you know, when my mother went up to take her shower before Shabbos, inevitably my father would carve out a small triangle to grab before the meal. And then my mother would smack him on the hands. Inevitably, I'm sure there was some Yiddish attached to that, possibly calling him a verstunkener Hund or something. Or that's for the guests. I need this like a Luchan cup. Again, that one. There's all sorts of words that I heard, but I don't necessarily know what they mean. Like kadachas, I know, like feverish or something, or it's something bad. But zusammen means also, maybe. I'm not positive.
It means together.
Okay, there you go. I probably heard that like in the context of benching or singing.
Mm.
Um, and some of it was like the transition of Yiddish to Hebrew. Like efsher is efshar, but my parents efsher some kugel, and it's not only the words; it's the intonation. You know, efsher some kugel maybe. So I grew
Yeah.
up with a lot of that.
Okay. And now let's turn to the words that you use in your life, because you do use a lot of Yiddish. What are some of those words?
A be gezunt is a big one. You know, like okay, it should all all go healthily, or this should happen healthily. And for me, and I think that this is typically how it's used. It's like, okay, I don't know what the end result's going to be, but abi gesund, I don't want to keep pressing on this point. I had a call with a client this morning who I informed him that the law is X, and the client was pushing back and saying, no, we need to do X, you know, A, B, and C. And it's like, you don't need to do A, B, and C. You're wrong. But abi gesund, you want to do it this way? We can do it this way. It's fine. What else do I use?
Wait, so just to clarify, was that client Jewish?
Uh, Biologically, paternally, but there was no Judaism in his house growing up.
Okay, so when you said a gezunt, did you explain what that meant?
I don't remember. I mean, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. My colleague Naomi, who I met her and her husband up in Oxnard when we started spending time up there. She didn't know I was Jewish. You know, it's Shabbos afternoon. I'm in shorts. I'm in a baseball cap. Sherry and I are walking, but she had the garb of a local Chabad community person. And so when we started working together, you know, I absentmindedly threw out an abi gezunt, and like a week later, she makes T-shirts. I have an abi gezunt T-shirt.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it sounds like that you're known for that phrase and that you are ecumenical in your audience. You use it among people, whether or not they have Yiddish as an ancestral language or whether or not they know it.
I think so, although I try to be sensitive to translate, but sometimes, you know, it's like it's mother's milk. It just comes out, you know. In the same way that I think the norm in the Ikar community is to wish everyone a Chag Sameach. Like for me, the default is Gut Yontif, you know, or Azisen Pesach. Like all that stuff made its way into first position. And I will frequently hesitate in a conversation because the first words that come to me are Yiddish or Hebrew, and I have to kind of do the calculation what's the appropriate aphorism in English, even though English is my first language.
Yeah. So you use a lot of Yiddish words. Tell us some more that you use specifically in the home with your children.
Uh, ugh, you're such a Zieskite. You're such a sweetie. Um, was tut sich? You know, what's happening? Again, another one of those. Shkoyach, of course, is Yeasher Kochacha, but, you know, the Yiddish version of that is Shkoyach or Yasher Koach, which is more kind of American.
And do you
Um,
use that to mean congratulations, you did a good job?
yeah, yeah.
Do you also use it to mean thank you?
Not
Like
so
if someone
much.
hands you something, because that is a new usage in Orthodox communities in Jewish English.
Yeah, I was going to say that sounds like something my nephews would say.
Are they Orthodox?
My nephews are all Haredi.
Haredi, uh-huh.
So like one, two of them were or went to the Mir. One of them still teaches there. One of them's in Lakewood and spent some time at Ner Yisrael. One of them is at a yeshiva in Far Rockaway, the name of which I don't remember. And yeah, actually, my nephew also has a podcast. It's a history podcast from like sort of the Haredi perspective. It's called Jewish History Soundbites by Yehuda Geberer. And
Hmm.
you want to talk about combining English with Yiddish, have a listen to Yehuda's podcast, which is fabulous.
Oh, it sounds great. So you are talking now about yeshivish, right? About
Yes.
Orthodox Jewish English. And do you consider yourself a speaker of yeshivish?
Um, I would say my Yeshivish is like my Aramaic. Like I know enough to be dangerous, but you know, you put the page in front of me, I'm going to have to break my teeth to get where I need to go.
Mm. But it
Unlike
sounds
my
like,
biblical Hebrew, which is very good.
okay. And it sounds like you dabble in yeshivish, like you maybe dabble in Aramaic, that you use bits of it here and there and you find it useful.
Only when I'm speaking to Yeshivish people.
Yeah.
Like otherwise,
Yeah.
it's not part of my vocabulary. But I think I might have even heard this from you at Limud LA 15 years ago. There's a thing that happens when you encounter people. You make each other feel comfortable by sending linguistic signals that tell them that they shouldn't be threatened by you or that they should be, whatever it is. So when I encounter my yeshivish neighbor, you know, I'll roll into a bit of that, whatever little bit I have. It tends to be more Yiddish because that's more comfortable for me. But like when he'll say something yeshivish, sometimes I can retort in yeshivish.
Yeah, that's called language accommodation,
Uh
that you're
huh.
accommodating to the other person's way of speaking or to what you think might be the other person's way of speaking. So maybe before you even meet someone, if they're dressed in a certain way, you might use a certain word or expression, assuming that they would also use it or at least understand it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And look, I think that happens every day. Certainly as a negotiator, even if it's not language, in a world where everything's on the phone or even on Zoom, you have to find a way to connect with people on the other side because if you don't, deals don't make. And, you know, then everybody's miserable. And, you know, like I have another, I'm mostly a liked lawyer. Like I'm reasonable, but, you know, I'm in a negotiation where it's very clear that this lawyer on the other side does not like me. And like, okay, whatever. Like, there's nothing. And I tried to make it comfortable. And what am I going to do? You know, there's nothing to do in that context. And it's the same thing when you encounter people where you try to find that connection linguistically. It happens, it doesn't happen. You know,
And so tell us how you do that if you get a sense that the person you're negotiating with or just another person you're speaking to is Jewish or knows some Yiddish. Like how do you give me an example of how you might do that?
um, oh, there's a million different ways to do it. you see something in the background. You know what? I'll tell you this story. So one of my songwriting, I do a lot of different songwriting challenges. One of them is with one of my mentors, Shanna in a Dress, who just released her new album, Sweet Spot. Well worth a listen. She's so talented, and she's a fabulous educator, and she attracts all of these very interesting songwriters. One of whom I'm gonna make her nameless. I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable, but one of whom I thought was, oh my God, she's such a fabulous singer songwriter. Like, I'm gonna pay attention to this one, and so I do. We go through a couple of challenges together, and then we're in a post October 7th world, and I do a songwriting challenge where we study the work of Taylor Swift, specifically Life of a Showgirl, and our challenge was to write 4 songs in 2 weeks that follow the arc of a hero's journey, which tracks what the Life of a Showgirl album is. And by the way, I do not write pop music except by accident. But nonetheless, I learned so much from studying people like Taylor Swift and Casey Musgraves. That's who I just finished, and so on and so forth. So this young woman announces, as part of this, that she's going to write a song against genocide. That's coded language. Now, this young woman doesn't know anything about me. But I get something from the coded language. I'm like, okay, I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to write what I'm going to write anyway, which happened to be, I ended up writing a hero's song cycle, all rooted in Tehillim, that theoretically, there are limitations to this, but theoretically works for the story of King David being chased by Saul in chapter 23 of Samuel 1, but also works as the story of people who go and, because David saves this city, I forget which, it also works as the story of people who left their homes in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and Beersheba to go and save people in the Gaza envelope on the day of October 7th. So it's that hero's journey. And of course, it was very clear what I was doing, because people said, what are you talking, like one person said, I don't know what you're talking about. And another person responded, this is very clear, he's talking about October 7th. So I was like, yes, good enough. Like, so at least one person gets it. I'm in the zone. And at the end of these things, we have these Zoom get-togethers where we share songs, we chit-chat, and this young woman was traveling, and she makes some comment like, ugh, I hate the 101, or the 405, or the 5. I was like, oh, she's in Southern California. I had no idea. Then a few minutes later, she says something else. And again, it was like accommodation language, if that's the right phrase, or a heritage word, or something that says to me, she knows some Jewish people. So I DM her, and I say, I've already DM'd you that I think you're a great songwriter. Shanna told us a while ago we should get together. I take it that you're in Southern California, and I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think you might be Jewish. Hanukkah's coming up. Do you want to come over to light candles? And she said, oh, thank you so much. I am Jewish. I live in Southern California. I'd love to get together. Well, it didn't end up being for Hanukkah. And we had a beautiful, beautiful conversation about our different perspectives about Israel. And we've remained friends, and we've even written a song together. So all that comes out of being attuned to other people's language.
Wow. Wow. Do you remember what word she used or what she said that
I
made you think that?
don't. I
Okay.
don't.
Okay. Do you use Yiddish or Hebrew in your songs?
Um, a little bit of Hebrew. I wrote one that is about healing, and it arises, I forget the psalm number, but it's King David is asking to be healed when he's sick at some point. And that brought me back to Moshe asking to heal his sister Miriam. And half the chorus, the verses are, Lord, please heal her, please, tracking the structure of Moshe's request. But the choruses are El Na Refanallah. That's the Hebrew equivalent. Mostly these days, I'm not doing a lot of Hebrew. Instead, what I'm doing is trying to find language that is connected to or a reinterpretation of what's in the Tehillim, sometimes very literally, and sometimes not, something that really comes out of it. Like I just shared one for a new podcast guest that I wrote with Daniel Silvera, and we look at the story of Avshalom and David, and we tell the story in a very modern way. But we tell the story right down to he's hanging by his hair from a tree.
Wow. And so most of your songs are inspired by Psalms, but not actually the words of the Psalms in English or Hebrew.
Correct, correct. I'm looking to, there's a complex, if you will, philosophy or theology about it. It goes something like God is the creator, to the extent one believes in God or a divine something. I don't even want to call it a being. The creator created. The psalmist, David or whomever, was inspired to write the psalm as a way to connect with the divine. I find the psalms simultaneously opaque and open. And I think it's about doing the work to find your understanding of the psalm. It's about finding your connection to it, and the songwriting process really helps me. So the first purpose of the song is for me to find my way into the psalm. The secondary purpose is, I share them with the world in hopes that I'm at Dayenu. There's Hebrew, but close enough. I'm at the it's enough if someone is moved and touched. But if I can get someone to be moved and touched and say, ooh, what's that Tehillim about? Why did he say that? Now, that's the trifecta.
So it's an educational goal in addition
I,
to a musical goal.
I would describe it as more spiritual. I think the education is the process by which you hit the spirituality. For if you're not a davener, if you're not a psalm reader, a davener means a prayer, then if my song gets you to open the book, now all of a sudden you're engaging in a 3,500-year-old tradition, or at least a 3,000-year-old tradition of engaging with the Psalms. If you are a prayer, and I can get you to, I just had a conversation with one of my friends who said, every Thursday I say this psalm, but your song opened me up to a whole new interpretation of it. I hadn't considered that. And now I'm like, okay, this guy's davening, this guy's praying is forever changed by a song that he may never listen to again. It's
Wow.
really powerful to me.
Yeah. So when most of my guests engage with their ancestral languages, they do so through heritage words, but there are other ways that people engage through food, through other cultural domains, especially music. And I'm wondering, you did mention various kugels. Tell me about other ways that you engage with Ashkenazi and Yiddish culture.
Learning is a big one. I hated it as a kid. I was an awful student, again, undiagnosed ADD, but at 17, I went to yeshiva to learn for a year, and I came back with the bug. I understood that there was a whole other thing there, and I ended up learning in yeshiva for 2 years in New York after that. Then I kind of left Jewish practice for a while, never left God, but had trouble with Jewish practice. And I lost my train of thought. So when I kind of got back into it, learning was the thing. It wasn't even the music. The music came second. And it happened because Rabbi Kanevsky, we were members at B'nai David at the time, we grew up together. We were both active in the Irgun Tz'irim, the kind of Young Israel's Jewish youth movement. And he knew that I know how to lead a kumsitz. So he asked me if I would lead a kumsitz, and I started leading kumsitzes again, very shyly, very nervously, because I'd been out of the performance space for a while. But that got me back into music and Jewish music in particular. Um, and I found all the kind of Jewish songs of my youth or of my young adulthood, and I kind of brought them into the house. My kids, neither of them were good sleepers. So, and I don't need a lot of sleep. Sherry needs a lot of sleep. So in the middle of the night when the kids got up, I would get up and I would sing. I'd sing Zmiris to them. I would sing, so those are the songs we sing on Shabbos, the long ones related to the Sabbath. But I would also sing Nigunim, wordless melodies, and those verses typically from the Psalms. And Maya and I were in the middle of a project. I'm sure it's going to go on for years, but when she has time, which is never these days, Maya's my eldest daughter, she comes over and, I'm like, okay, what do you want to sing? And like, I'll figure out the chords to whatever she wants to sing, and then we record it so that she has it specifically so she can give it over to her kids if she has them, one day.
Wow.
Um,
So the music you're talking about is Hebrew, it sounds like.
There was some Yiddish too. I mean, look, I grew up with the Eufen Pripichiks and all the other stuff like that. My Zadie made us laugh. This is oh my God, it's Moish, I forget the name of it, but a duo. Well, I grew up with all that stuff. The London Boys Choir, Pirche, and they often threw out some Yiddish songs.
So they were Yiddish songs mostly from the Orthodox world.
Yeah. Although again, so my parents had a lot of that and they would sing that. Here's what I retained among the Yiddish songs. It's on Pesach, we would sing 3 different songs that were in Yiddish. So, like most people sing, who knows one or Echad Mi Yodea in Hebrew or English, and I've heard it in Ladino. Not that I remember it in Ladino, but for me, like my father, our Siddharm went late because we would sing every version of every song we knew. So for this one, he would start off. Do you want me to sing?
I
Or do you want me
do.
to tell? Okay.
Definitely
He was
sing.
he would start off with Mahano Maramane Daber Mane Daber, which has another Yiddish version. Like I forget, I don't know what the Yiddish language is, but my father was taught the Hebrew opening. And it's something like, because it all scrunched together, so I'm not sure I know the words, but it sounds something like, was min sagen, was min reden, was is eins badait, was is eins badait. Eins is, neiner is der Gott, and Gott is einer, and weiter keiner. And you go on through all 13 of them. I actually recorded a version of it like 15 years ago, just so my nephews and kids would have it.
Oh, wow. Maybe we can share that if you don't mind,
Sure,
if you
I'll
can
send
find
that to
it.
you.
We sing that at my Seder as well, but
Oh, no
it
kidding.
it yeah, yeah, a little different, but quite similar. Um, what are the other Yiddish songs you sing at your
So
Seder?
there's another one of that one, which is Eins, eins, was is sagt eins? Ich weiß, sagt eins. Eins is einer, and einer is der Gott, and Gott is einer. Also, he sagt eins, something like that. And then that one is not accretive. It's just you go through each one.
Okay.
And there's a lot of Hebrew in it. Drei, was is actually drei? And by the way, in Manomer Manodaber, it's the Avos. It's not really
Yeah.
Yiddish, it's the forefathers.
Well, it's a Hebrew word in Yiddish.
Correct, correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I, I, you would blow my mind if this last one is something you sing at your Seder. You know what? It'll even blow my mind if you've heard it. So, and you've been to my house. So when you're leaving the door, there's a bakery advertisement. I don't know if you've ever noticed it,
Oh,
but it's
yeah.
in Hebrew.
Hmm.
It's in Hebrew and Yiddish, and
Hmm.
it's the matzah bakery of my ancestor Chaim Talesnik. and it's still there in Me'asharim to this day. In the bakery, or so the mythology goes, they used to sing this song. And it goes like this. Zog chitkindelach vasatai chahalef. I. Listen, children, how do you say A or Aleph? I. Nachataich, another pronunciation. I. Zog chitkinder alenena ay 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 ashtekale. And then it goes on. Beis is Bakin Bagel. Gimel is, Grabe Goyim, the filthy nations. Dalet is Dare Damim, smooth, silky stockings. Dare Damim is hot-blooded, sorry. Vav is Veiche Viber, sexy still stockings. Zion is Zaydin Zayde, which I assume means old grandfather, but Zaydin may have other meanings, which would make sense given how somewhat bawdy this song is. Ches is Chasidin Chapin, Tes is Tamirim Tapin, and Yud is Yehudim Yoldin, reproductive Jews.
Oh my goodness. No, I've not heard this, and it's fascinating. I would love to get a copy of that.
I have a recording of this too. It's
Wow.
dark.
It's interesting that it's so bawdy. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're almost out of time, but I want to ask you about your Torah reading. So even in non-Orthodox congregations where it's not the norm, you read Torah in the Ashkenazi style. Tell us about that.
So at High Hebrew Institute of Long Island, we learned in the Ashkenazi style, notwithstanding the fact that several of our educators were Shoah survivors who landed in Israel and then made their way back to the States, where we would have thought we would have gotten like the Ivrit rather than the Ivris. Then in 1771, for second grade, my family moved to Israel, and I had a very hard first month, and then like that, I became an Israeli kid. And my Hebrew was like, you couldn't differentiate my Hebrew from the other kids who'd grown up there. I came back to the States for third grade. They put me a year behind in English subjects, and they put me a year ahead or 2 years ahead in Hebrew, and it didn't work. Because, I was fish out of water in all spaces. Ultimately, they landed me, it was a push on the secular studies because I was far behind everybody. And it was easy for me on the Hebrew. They put me like kind of in the advanced third grade class. The end result of which is in order to fit in, I very quickly sud up and lost my rolled R's. And then like when I left the community, like through all the time that I was part of it, I was always like a suh guy. But when I left the community, like I that's what I was still a suh guy. When I came back and I was at B'nai David, and everyone there has, I'm sorry, judgment, warning, the awful American Hebrew accent, because it's nishtahin, nishtaher, another big one for me. It's neither here nor there. Like I was like, okay, I'm gonna try it, and I'm still a Bal Tefillah, although at Ikar it's only on Zoom. Like I have the skills to learn how to lead prayer, and so I started doing it first with the American Hebrew, and I was like, feels fake. Then I tried it with the Israeli miftah accent, and I was like, that's better, but I hear people snickering. And I tried it a few weeks, and I was like, you know what? I don't want to have to focus on that either. Back to So We Go, and that's probably 23 years ago already.
So you use the Saf even when you're leading prayers, not just reading Torah.
Correct.
Okay. And what reactions have you gotten to that?
Mostly I get, dude, you're old school.
Right. Yeah. And and what do you say?
I'm like, it's available to anyone who wants it.
Yeah. Yeah. What about your children? When they pray or read Torah, what do they do?
They're Ramah kids. They speak American Hebrew. To the
Uh-huh.
extent that they speak it. Maya
Yeah.
goes to Ikar and Base and a few other places, and when she does, she generally uses the t and the non-rolled r's.
Uh-huh. Okay. Any other thoughts you want to share with us before we wrap up?
Um, okay, I'm hoping that no one in your audience was dreaming, falling asleep. And on my podcast, I end with a blessing. But is it okay if I give you another blessing here?
Absolutely.
Okay. May your work continue to grow. I don't know if you normally do this, but I know that in order to run an organization, it needs money and support. So if you're not going to ask for it, because I think the work you're doing is really important for the world, not just for Jews, I'm going to ask whoever listens to this to donate money to your organization.
Aw, thank you, Shep. That's so nice. And yes, we do definitely need money. And if anyone is interested, they can donate at jewishlanguages.org.
Sweet.
Well, thank you
May that
so much.
blessing come to fruition.
Amen. Thank you so much, Shep.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Heritage Words is a partnership of the Hebrew Union College Jewish Language Project and HUC Connect, supported by tax-deductible donations from listeners like you. I'm the producer and host, Sarah Bunin-Benor. Kyle Elbaz Fingerhut is assistant producer, Avishai Artsy is editor, and Talia Ehrenberg is video editor. The music is from Maurice El Medioni's French and Algerian Arabic album Café Oran, featuring the klezmatics David Krakauer and Frank London, courtesy of Piranha Records. This podcast is one of the many ways the Jewish Language Project raises awareness about the diversity of the Jewish people and the phenomenon of heritage words. We also have online crowdsourced dictionaries where you can find the words mentioned in each episode. Our social media posts include Music Mondays, Jewish Word of the Week, and Fun Facts. And we offer free educational materials and exhibits that you can visit online or display in a synagogue, museum, or community center. Contact us about our live tapings, study tours, and sponsorship opportunities. Looking for gifts for Shabbat dinners and Passover seders? Check out our whimsical and educational t-shirts, tote bags, posters, stickers, and aprons. You can find all this content and donate, volunteer, or sign up for our email list at jewishlanguages.org. Thank you, merci mucho, ilaha yaviloch, ashenem dank, shukran, soch boshi, toda rabah.